got me for about an hour. So first off, let me kind of intro you into this. I'm going to be talking about managing change in a Microsoft world. And I've been talking on this subject for quite a few years. There's things that are always changing, and that's probably the most important part of why I think it's so relevant and important to talk about. This topic from our survey results happens to be probably the one that we hear every single month. We want to know more about governance. How can we operationalize our M365 environment, or our tenant, or our management, our deployment, our change management, our training, all these various things that we're all trying to do in organizations. One, because it's the right thing to do, right? It makes it a whole lot easier if you have and bring all your friends, all the stakeholders together to make decisions, to learn where a change occurs. Many of you might be coming here for that very thing, to get all that great information from Don on what are the message center updates, because maybe you didn't get access to the message center. I'm going to talk about a role that you should all have, especially because if you attend these, it's something within your organization that you can get private access to in the M365 Admin Center to see where change occurs. That's first and foremost. So hopefully today's topic, some of it may be like old hat for you. Hopefully you'll learn a few things. But for many of you, I think this is going to be more of a lesson on how does Microsoft deploy when change occurs to your neighbor and you're sitting right next door, or you're on a Teams call and they have something different, why that does occur. So I'm going to be talking about all of that. Hopefully you'll get good information out of this. Feel free, ask any questions that you have. Don and I can field them. The rest of the board can also field them. If you want to come off mute, feel free as well. I love interaction. I don't want to be the only talking head here. But if you're shy, go ahead, use chat. I am the user group president. I also work at Microsoft. But prior to that, I was an IT pro. So SharePoint admin, global admin for most of my career. So managing Microsoft, or managing the change that occurs at Microsoft, is just something I've been dealing with for a very long time. And I find it really relevant for probably most people on this call to learn, how are we rolling out things? When will we get these things? So the concept is really, everybody gets this cool new feature, and either you as an end user or you as an admin that's trying to control the change, communicate the change, feels like frustrated, right? And so how can Microsoft help provide you with ways, and I'll show you many of them, to be able to get to that change before everyone else does. So here's our agenda. We're going to talk about, why do we need governance? Hopefully everybody will know why, but I'll talk about some of the main reasons why we do. I'll also go into where and when you can find change. So where does the change occur? When does that change occur? So you can put together training documentation, communicate out, talk to your help desk, because I think that's the one group we tend to forget. Because they're the first line of defense as people are calling in to say, hey, this changed, somebody moved my cheese. And talk about stakeholders, who are they? Talk about RACI documents, and then where do you communicate change? And understanding your organization enough to know where they want to consume their information. So why do we need governance? That's the first topic. This is really around end user and admin impact. And it's interesting because it's such a different mindset than we had if we've been working all in probably IT or whatever departments we're in our organization over the last 10 years. It has completely shifted. And we call that an evergreen service management model. This is where you're probably familiar in your own personal life too. You get change on your phone all the time. We understand that, right? Because we're used to that, but that's not always the case for all the different generations in the workforce. And so understanding that, because it is an evergreen service management model, it's not a traditional model any longer, where you can control that change through deployment, through 2-3 year life cycle management of those products. It's now iterative, right? It's very agile. And if you take a look here, you're going to see in the last year, I think last year was 450 plus new Teams features. That's just Teams. So think of Outlook, Word, PowerPoint. I mean, you saw Cameo earlier from Don. All these things, they're coming at you all over the place. We have 450 plus coming in the next 12 months. So we just don't stop. And the biggest reason I think for me sharing this slide is, one, it's because of feedback from all the customers that say, I can't manage this, or I can't deploy this, or I can't use this without these things. They get bumped up on the engineers list to work on. Obviously, feedback portal is a space that we utilize that makes relevancy of trending items towards what the engineers should focus on, what we should put budget into. But more than that, back to my original question is, why do we need governance? Because of this, because of all the change that occurs. Most people can handle changes that are probably small, but when they're big, that's when it's really impactful to know more about that information, when it's going to be coming out, how we release that information, what you can do to get in front of it before everyone else. So we have what's called a release management validation process. I think all software companies do, where they create those features kind of in this bubble. Then they start doing the testing and they roll it out through different rings and then roll out to the rest of the organization to test. So if you ever hear Donald or myself say something like, yeah, boy, I played with that earlier, it's because it was in ring 2 and we happen to be in ring 2. Yes, I did take a look at those Maybelline filters, and it is true, it's the product Maybelline, but I'm not sure what customer requested that, but we have them. So therefore, enable or disable, it's all in your control. And then we have customer release options. So we have what's called targeted release and then worldwide standard release. Within this process, there are actually different versions. So there's a ring 3.6, I believe. So there's different places that you can be. I believe you can have it at the tenant level or at the individual level. I've seen both. I've been in both. The nice thing here is there's a lot of benefits to the targeted release. That's getting the capabilities before everyone else to plan any of your training documentation, any of the testing that you might need, especially if you have processes in place or you have a knowledge base of how things are done, and now we moved your cheese again, that you have to update. Targeted release is really great for testing out and trialing new products as well. So think of, okay, I want to know more about Viva Connections Home. Getting in that targeted release when it becomes private preview or public preview, you can check it out beforehand. And I'll go ahead and walk you through what is that timeline, because everybody wants to know, yeah, but how long does it in this before it gets to this? I'll say that a lot of products, it can vary. However, the public preview is something that you can control individually. So that's one option, and that's how we go through this deployment process. Now, as far as worldwide standard release, I think it's important to note how we do that. We first start from all the way over in Asia to America. So we go through Europe. We have data centers around the world. I forgot how many now, but we have so many data centers. We start at the data center level. So if you're wondering why maybe you get a change, maybe it's multi-region within your tenant, and so they may see it before you. That's one. We don't have our data centers necessarily set up by organization. So when you ask for a date, like I need to know the date it's going to hit so we can plan for it, and it won't actually really work like that because the way that data centers are, it's spread, right? It's where you're closest to when your tenant was first created. So for instance, many of us at least are in probably Minnesota. Chances are our data centers in Chicago. If you created your tenant here in Minnesota. So the way, I guess the reasoning for why I'm sharing that is because the way that change rolls across the globe, it can have a different effect depending on how your tenant was created, where it was created, the syncing cycle, if you're multi-geo, all those things really take into effect. So hopefully that's understood. And there are different, either if it's client side versus feature side. And let's see, Jake asks, will all users on in the same data center? Chances are, let's see, well, all users on in the same data. I think you're asking, like, if your organization was created here in Minnesota, are you all in Chicago? That should be the case, but not always. Because if you're working hybrid, then you've got maybe employees that are in California and they may hit something that's closer for better performance. All right, now I'm going to switch a little bit to shared responsibility. This is a model I think we've had for a long time because it really has to do with our IaaS, our PaaS, and of course our SaaS. Our SaaS is a software as a service product. That's all M365. And really the important piece here, I'm going to just highlight, is around the controls that you have, right? So I'm going a little bit into the administrative portion, but as an admin, you do have application level controls. And what we do at Microsoft is we provide you policies, settings, all types of like security, identity, all those application and service level control that probably I'd say on the default side is for about 80% of customers. So think of like, okay, this is on by default. Why is it on by default? Because that's usually the highest percentage of what customers want to have enabled. Now, that doesn't mean close your eyes and walk away. You have to go and do your due diligence, and you have to go through and make sure that the controls that we set are either what you want or what you don't want. So that's the due diligence of that governance. And you can't necessarily always make that decision in a vacuum. So really important that, and we'll talk about RACI and we'll talk about who should be included in that. But as far as shared responsibility, having the application level controls available to you is really the responsibility of the customer. And then I do want to talk about organizational change strategy. I think it's interesting. I've spoken on this topic, and I asked the audience and poll them like, okay, what level do you think you are? And they don't always know. And I think that's interesting because that really goes back to, well, then how do you know what controls to put in place, right? It goes back to if you're really restrictive, and I've been in an organization that it was very, very restrictive. They want almost everything off. That takes a lot of work as an admin. I mean, we can all agree to turn off SharePoint. That's no easy task, but if that's what's being asked, you have to know how to do all that stuff. And then, of course, are you on the other side, which is you allow features to just be turned on by default. You are open to all change. Maybe everybody is in the update policies, so they see it before, well, along with everyone else, you get the change immediately. But I'd say probably the majority, and this is where that 80% comes in, is that you allow some change, right? You want to have a balance. So you make restrictions. Maybe not everybody can create a team, but you have an automated process. So you're not, blocking the team's creation, the productivity and collaboration of all your end users because you have automation in place, but you're also not putting all that stress on IT to create that for you. So usually I see that to be around, about 80%. So knowing your change strategy is really helpful, especially as change is coming out. That might require you to do more due diligence in blocking something, testing it out in a small group, and then enabling that. All right, so who's responsible for change? It is shared for sure amongst Microsoft and amongst the customer. I always think this slide is kind of funny because I remember first seeing it and I'm like, really the only thing you have to do is communicate new features? There's a whole lot more involved. I just laugh at it because, obviously you need to go through all the other things administratively to be able to prepare. But the true role when a change first occurs is you have to identify one, you have to know about the change, right? You have to maybe validate it in some sort of subgroup. And maybe you do have a champion network. Wouldn't that be ideal if we all did? Or we have a governance board, which hopefully after this call, you'll all go create if you don't have one. But having that in place, so you have to know about the change. You have to be able to communicate it. You have to get together. You might have to have a conversation about it. Think of what Don shared today on the message center. It's like these updates. Okay, you need to make sure everybody else knows that there are changes that are going to be coming down the pipe that may affect your change management strategy. And then during a change, right, what is the impact to your organization, for your end users? Have they been asking for this? I remember private channels probably being the highest requested feature in the feedback portal, previously known as user voice. That was so highly requested because everyone who had ever used SharePoint always had subsites. So how do I have one location where I can collaborate in a more locked down area? But you have to know, does your organization want that? And then staying aware of that workflow. Do you need to do any sort of deployment things? Do you need to, I guess, have anything added to any of your adoption or change management spaces? So it could be a SharePoint site where you have all your training documents. Maybe you're leveraging Yammer or Viva Engage and communities to talk about the changes, announce the changes. Maybe you create videos about the change. So knowing where to put that. And then, of course, after the change, right, you want to create some adoption for it. Maybe one group wanted breakout rooms and they had been hoping for it and they finally got it. But then you see value in other business groups that want to leverage that, creating that buzz, right? Reviewing the factors. So a lot of that is really around the ROI of that feature or of that product. And then, the changes, of course, are always designed to benefit. I mean, hopefully not hinder, but making sure that users are aware. So that's purely sometimes in organizations, an entire person's role or an entire team's role. I've been, unfortunately, in a small organization before deploying M365, maybe about 5,000 users in one of my roles in the past. And I was everything. So when you think of, okay, you're an admin, you're also focused on adoption, you're focused on communication, you have to schedule all the training. Oh, and then you got all the configuration. And so that can be really overwhelming. So, creating something, a cadence for people to know where the change occurs is really important. You can certainly use Power Automate to flush that out, send it over to Yammer or a community. So maybe you can automate that a little bit if you feel like you are on an island. But this is really the role in communicating that change that Microsoft is pushing out to you. So where can you find change? Hopefully everybody has an idea because y'all came here today. So you must be here mostly for the M365 Message Center announcements. That's the quickest way in a 20-minute block of time to get caught up on a monthly list of changes. But there are many more places to consume where and what the changes are. So I'm going to talk through that. I think the top ones, of course, I'll always raise my hand and say the Message Center. If you're not living in there, if you're not looking at that weekly, if you're not at least filtering it by major updates or admin impact or end user impact, you're not going to know about the change, right? That is our primary way that we communicate. The other two big ones are the roadmap. So I'll show you what that looks like, along with blogs. So blogs are usually, we have a new product, maybe it's Viva Engage. You're going to get a lot of in-depth information in a blog post. Yes, and Pete, the Message Center. So if you want an hour long of learning about the Message Center and having a couple MVPs banter over it, that's always a fun show as well. And then, of course, we have the release preferences, Teams update policies, and apps release channels, which used to be called Office Pro Plus. So I'm going to go through each of these. I'm going to first start with the Microsoft Communications Schedule. I'm not even sure if this is published anywhere. I think I've just created it over time when I originally was a customer. But this is what I've seen is that like something that has a full-on life cycle, it will take over a year plus for it to cycle through. So we will tell you over a year in advance. A disruptive change is also over a year. First thing that comes to mind, info path forms. We are going to get rid of info path forms, but I think at that time when we first announced it, it was like going to be a year or 2 years, and then I think it got pushed out, and because we listen to what you need and then make the changes accordingly. But usually anything that's that disruptive, you're going to know a year in advance, and you will probably know those announcements on the message center or in blog posts. Then we have the public roadmap. So the public roadmap, I'm going to show you that. That's usually when engineers feel pretty comfortable, as you remember the rings, as we get through the Microsoft or get into the Microsoft ring. Obviously, a lot of the bugs have been worked out. A lot of the preview programs have maybe already been established or completed. And now we feel pretty strongly like this product isn't going to go backwards. We're gonna push it forward, or this feature. You can go and see those updates that are on the public roadmap. So they're, like I said, about 3 months before they actually reach a launch will be posted there. Then we have what's called targeted release, which you saw from the rings. That's going to be your public preview that you could opt into. And normally you'll find that about a week or so before it goes to GA. And then standard release for that will be about 3 weeks. And then we've got, I just read this, we just updated the M365 message center area, which I try to go out to every quarter to see if they've updated it, which you saw today. I have a slide on it that I stole from Don, that we're making updates to the message center. But all major updates, we are now stating are 30 days prior to them happening, which is fantastic, because I think I used to always live by, well, when, what? So we're, I guess, getting a little bit more granular on communicating that time. Then we have office blogs, technical and community blogs that we do. Those are about a week prior to them also a feature being rolled out. I think of those as our Ignite conferences or our Build or other big conferences. Usually the day of or a few days after, you're going to see a ton of announcements. So the direct channels, I just cruise through here real quick. We've got the message center. You can just play a game of how many times I say the message center. When this is recorded, you can watch it. There's also an admin mobile app. I don't know if you all have downloaded it. I have. It's great, I think, for smaller companies or small changes or to look up something. Little hard for scaling, but I think it's still really cool. So you could manage it a little bit better and also get our communications, while you're traveling or whatever you need to do. Another extremely popular place is Twitter. Believe it or not, that's actually very much leveraged by our engineers or any announcements that we might have. So if you're not following that, you can follow a product or M365 as a whole. So if there's any updates, you can go directly to that product team and start chirping and maybe get some feedback. Of course, the Service Health Dashboard, that's the also direct way that you can communicate back to us. So you can open up a ticket, or you can triage, you can take a look at the status of all the services. What I think is always an important add, if anything, is to give access to the Service Health Dashboard to your help desk. If they don't see it, guess what? That call is coming to you. It's going to get routed up to you for you to do the same thing, which is look in the dashboard. Oh yeah, it looks like this is down. Looks like it's been down for 2 hours. Give them access, like relinquish your control, right? Give them the ability to have insight into all the services. So they can go ahead and, if somebody's calling in to say, hey, this is down, you can now triage it with a little bit more intelligence instead of thinking, oh, this is maybe just an end user impact. It could be global. And then if you find that it actually has occurred to a few people because you've got more people calling in, now you have to go into your support ticket and say, okay, do we have a ticket on this already, or should we be creating one? So that's also a good way to kind of manage communication, manage some of that change. I've talked about this a little bit. I think as a user group, I feel like we could really improve as a community to leverage Feedback Portal if we wanted to, because the interesting part about the Feedback Portal is it's made on weight. And I know I'm being recorded, but I'm going to try really hard maybe to edit this out. Don, remind me. But I've heard that if you have more than 1,000 votes on a feature that's being requested or on a change, it will go to the engineer's desk. Which, if we think of how many members that we have in this user group, we all want something, we could all vote it up together, and it can push up the ladder to get actually worked on. So that's the Feedback Portal. I think it'd be interesting to, within your own company, to leverage the Feedback Portal, right? Say, hey, we all want this. Let's create the request and then send the link out to everybody who cares about it, and they can also make their vote. So a great communication tool. It was user voice. I will make a note. Yeah, okay, hold on. 1,000 votes is the same as with user voice. Yeah, it's the same thing. So let me just talk about that real quick. Yeah, I know, Jake, we're going to talk about that too. So used to be called user voice. It was a product that we, I think, subscribed to at Microsoft. And just like anything in every other organization, why are we using this when we could just build it ourselves? And so that's what we did. That change occurred because the Feedback Portal is actually now run off of Dynamics 365. So that's why it has a rename. That's why it has a rebrand. Yes, rest in peace, user voice. Okay, so how do we get more votes as an admin? I know we've talked about that. We're going to probably have it offline too. Honestly, I think the best way is to socialize it, crowdsource it. I mean, that's my personal advice, is leveraging the Yammer communities or Viva Engage communities. I would say you could also do this through news. So if you are in the comms or marketing and you know that there's a change that you want to see or you want to have improved on, you could write a story about it, put the link to the Feedback Portal item, and have everybody vote it up. So lots of cool stuff and cool ways you can do it, but you have to figure out, going back to, okay, during a change or before a change, how do people want to be communicated, and really where are they? All right, next we have the blogs, and of course the roadmap. So I'm going to go through these a little bit deeper. Okay, so Jake asked, so if I create a feedback on MS Feedback, can I share it here? Oh, absolutely. You grab that link, throw it in the chat, and just watch the votes come up. If they all agree, of course. All right, so Message Center. If this is new for you, I would pay attention a little bit. This really is the primary channel that we communicate changes that are relevant to your tenant. So it's not like a news channel, right? It is a direct communication channel from Microsoft as it relates to products that you have purchased. And of course, features that are going to be coming, that are going to be removed, deprovisioned, that may affect you. And the cool thing is there's a lot of ways that you can do some of this filtering. I know in the past with our biannual events, we've always tried to have somebody speak on syncing your Message Center post to Planner. Those are recorded. They're on our YouTube channel. I think we have 2 on there. Automate it. You know, you can go to it, or you can have it go to something. And if it goes to Planner, now you can do some assignment, right? If you create a bucket for Exchange, put all the Outlook services sent to that bucket. Now you have, you can kind of like, if you will, track the service with the person who's responsible for it. So that they can get it out in front of them. They can automatically see what's relevant to them in this bucket. That's one way. I mean, certainly you could do it a few ways, but there are filters that you can leverage. I'd say the ones that I care about the most are admin impact or major update, just as a IT pro. And then, of course, this cool announcement that Don had shared around when features are either going to be scheduled, rolling out, or launched. That's something we do on our roadmap. So I think it's really cool that we're bringing this into the space where people are probably living. I would recommend, and I don't think I've talked about it too much, but yeah, you can get it out and yeah, you can go to it. But I think it's also important to look at it on a weekly or at least a monthly, because if you think of an admin impact, what if it's in that 30-day window that goes over a weekend that you had your message center meeting, go past that time, now all of a sudden something occurred, right? A policy change, a policy got added, something that doesn't align with your change management strategy at your organizational level. So, I mean, if anything, I would try to make a cadence on managing the message center. Here's some quick FAQs. Nothing I want to cover except for the message center reader role. So if you're an admin, most admins can see the posts, not all, which is, I think, kind of interesting. But message center reader role is a read-only role. You can't screw up anything in your admin center if you give somebody access. They can't screw it up whatsoever. So they can read, they can go in there, they can put their email address in there to get a digest of them. They can even filter, I believe, by if all they're responsible for is Yammer, cool. They can just look at that if they want to filter it. The importance of it is that all this information about change is living in there. And if you don't give it to the person who is the admin, the product owner, the trainer, maybe even help desk, if they don't know the change that's coming, well, they're not going to feel very confident about managing their work, right? Or helping and support people. So if anything I can point out here is, yes, please leverage that reader role. You can even, I think you can add a couple email addresses to it, but you could also send it to a distro list. So they can get, as updates come out, you can get messages sent to you. All right, here's the roadmaps. A lot of cool things on the roadmap. If you don't ever go out to it, you might want to consider it. Here are some cool things. This is where you can start doing filtering. So a lot of times in our user group calls, I get the question of, is it GCC? Is it going to be rolled out to GCC or GCC High or to the EDU tenants? Because we do have different types of tenants within M365. You can actually filter on them. So if all you care about is GCC, then I would certainly do a couple things. I would sign up for an RSS feed. I would focus on and filter to what I care about. And then I would probably automate it some way to get sent to me. Yeah, as you can see, RSS and then sorting. So again, going back to the original message center announcement that we had, you can see what's in development, you can see what's rolling out and what's going to be launched. Now, okay, we could probably argue this a little bit, like, okay, why didn't that date move? It was supposed to already come out, but it's still saying that it came out last month and I haven't seen it. I think they're getting better. I honestly do. Those are far and few between now. I think it's getting better. That's all I can say is I think it's getting better. So take some of that with a grain of salt. But certainly, if you see something sitting there, I would talk to your Microsoft, your admin or your account team and say, hey, go chase this for me. Because I was expecting it and now it's just still sitting there. And then, of course, we've got blogs. I think the recent one was sign language capabilities to gaming. So if you haven't checked out the games in Teams, those are really cool too. But these are, like I said earlier, T-7 days. So a week before it potentially might be going to general availability, and maybe even on by default, you're gonna want to stay current on this. And it does sound like a lot of reading, message center posts, you've got the blogs, you've got the roadmap, and I'll show you a cool way to actually automate a lot of this in one central location, so you're not kind of all over the place trying to find it. All right, so if you haven't checked this out, I think I'll grab the link, but basically we get this question a lot. You probably do too if you're administrating teams at all. Why do I see this feature? I did talk to you earlier. Yes, it gets rolled out geographically. It goes to data centers. People might be in multiple data centers. But one of the bigger ones here, the way that we do it, it's usually a multi-step process. So that it kind of goes back to if it's enabling with a feature flag, meaning like under the hood, we're just enabling and flagging it to be turned on. Chances are it might take actually 3 days to go through that cycle. And so that's why, and I know it's probably not the best answer when you're trying to plan for training or announce something, hey, you might get it. But really, we all know IT and there's processes. And so when new features are rolled out, the version has to be pushed first and then the enablement. And that's through that feature flag. So I thought this was really helpful understanding the architecture, the way change gets fundamentally rolled out. And then for you as at least to be able to talk to maybe your executives who said, hey, where is that thing? You can at least give them a little bit of context around it. All right. So speaking of how do you take control, the things you can control, we have 3 ways you can do that. We have, first off, in Office 365, we have release preferences. So and this is in the M365 Admin Center, or I've been hearing a lot lately around it being called the MAC, Microsoft Admin Center. There's 3 ways. You can either allow standard release for everyone, all right? And that means that as we communicate through blogs and through the message center, it's going to be at that general availability timeline. However, if you're in change management or you're in the administrative space, or really frankly, any M365 stakeholder, you're probably going to want to get the targeted release updates first. And what I mean is that before, maybe a week prior to everyone else, you have enough time to put your training documentation together, maybe get your help desk in there so they can see it. So then when somebody calls in and says, hey, this thing changed, they can already say, oh yeah, we've been testing it. This is how it behaves, right? And timing and communication, I mean, that's so key, especially if you're supporting any number of customers. The next piece is M365 apps for business, formerly Office Pro Plus, so Word, PowerPoint, Excel, etc. We have what's called channels. And I think it's really interesting. If you don't pay attention to this piece, then you're going to find that, well, depending on when your tenant was created, most people by default were in the semi-annual enterprise channel, which means they're actually 6 months behind. So think of as they go to a conference, they're like, I can't wait for this thing. Well, they're actually not going to get it for 6 months, which is really frustrating. So understanding the channels when we roll out new updates. So the Cameo piece in Word that Don put out, most likely it's because he's in the current channel. So as new updates come, he gets it right away. And you can change it up. You can create many flavors. Maybe you want your executives to be in the semi-annual. Maybe you do want them, 4 or 6 months behind. But I think all your M365 stakeholders need to be at least in the monthly channel so they can see the change. They can create the documentation, they can post, they can communicate. So that is the Office Pro Plus, now called M365 Apps for Business. Next, we have Microsoft Teams. If you haven't checked out the update policy, this is in the Teams Admin Center. This is where you're going to get early access. So if you wanted early access to learn about shared channels and create them. I believe private channels was already or was in the early release as well. I would highly recommend, if you haven't done this, please do it too. This is where, much like in Microsoft, where we have these rings, you have a core group that probably wants to know about the change before everyone else too. And you need their feedback. You need to know, hey, should we enable this? Depending on your change management model at the organizational level. You may, have to, if you're in a maximum change capacity where you have to know about it, you have to go through your GLR process, right? Your legal reviews, your risk reviews, all that kind of stuff. This is also the group who needs to be in the update policy and see it before it rolls out. So these are the 3 ways that you can take control of change within Microsoft. All right, this is just talking about the planner piece. I think somebody put a link in the chat, which is awesome. You can organize your plan by service and leverage, the automation of having the message center go to planner on a sync cycle. And if you don't want it by service, you could do it by workflow, right? You could do it by triage, or you're rolling it out, or you're planning for it. A great way, to have like a scrum call on all the services. All right, so the first portion.
By the way, Michelle.
Yep.
Jake sent in a user voice list or option for everybody to provide feedback. If you go back 1 slide, on when a change happens, it doesn't update the planner.
Oh, perfect.
I know. Like,
yeah, that's
sweet.
Awesome.
Everybody upvote that one, please, because that's a great addition if you're using that planner sync with Message Center. Those ones that change, like for instance, the dates change a lot on some of these, like they get pushed out, right? They're not going to be reflected within planner. So we want to be able to have a mechanism that updates that in planner if that's the case.
Awesome. I'm voting right now, Jake. Sweet. All right, so that means by the time we're done with this call, everybody's going to click on it if they agree, and we'll have about 80, 100 something votes. Awesome. All right, okay, so just to show you the location of where you make these changes, this is on the Mac, and settings, organizational profile, and this is where you can set if you want to open it, all the change up of Office 365 to everyone, lock it down to your M365 stakeholders or your champions network or whatever you've created, or even to a select group. So everyone, or I think a select group. This decision can't be done in a vacuum, right? You have to think of what's your organizational change model. If everyone agrees that we have to, lock everything down, then you might want to be in the standard space and have only a limited amount in the targeted release. However, if you're on the other side where you're like, bring me change, let all the releases happen all the time. It's all good. We can all adapt. You might want to then just say, hey, a target release for everyone. Let's enjoy the change. So that's where that's located. Just a few notes here. I don't probably need to tell you why it's a benefit. I think it just, there's a lot of reasons, testing, validating, preparing users for notifications, internal help desk. Again, I can't stress that enough. Make sure they know, right? They're the people who have to support everyone. And if you don't tell them or you don't give them access, that most likely is going to come up to you or move through the tiers of support until you find somebody who actually looked at the message center and said, oh yeah, that was going to be disabled on this date. So, I mean, it goes back to communication, right? And change management. Sometimes like you might have to go through a compliance or security review, and also to learn about how to control it, right? There might be controls. I don't think we always roll out feature controls, but when we do, it's probably because we've been asked to, and that it's relevant, and it might be relevant for you. So knowing those controls so you can actually go and tinker with your wrench in the admin center and make the change that you need. All right, here's the location for the M365 apps, formerly Office Pro Plus. I don't know if you guys knew that name change. It always kind of messes me up a little bit, but yep, they're the apps now. It's in the Mac in settings, org settings, under services, under Office installation. And of course, you might do this several ways. You might be leveraging more automated ways to do this. But these are the main. So current, monthly, semi-annual, the recommended use, the release, and the feature updates. I like change Tuesdays. So having it monthly, the second Tuesday of the month, I think is always really good. It's something that people can expect, right? We're already making a lot of changes and pushing changes. Let's make it, at least on some sort of cadence or cycle. All right, so this is the Teams public preview, early access to unreleased features. This part, why I even blew up the not enabled, I think I was even confused. Basically not enabled, obviously, and this is by policy. So globally, you don't get it. By default, you don't have access to the early features of Teams. You can leave that. I mean, I have my own, my own thoughts about how I would manage the Teams policies and the Teams settings, but I think creating a new policy is probably best practice, and then putting in your users, and then making the toggle change here, which is not enabled, right? They won't get it. Enabled, it does enable regardless of whether the user is enrolled in the Office current channel, because what confused me here is that we have the Teams client, and the client is obviously controlled by the channels, M365 apps for business. Right, there's client changes. However, you'll have to know that change might affect this change here. So what I mean there is, regardless of whether a person is in the current channel getting the change, if they're not, then this preview will overwrite that. Basically my point. And of course, then you've got follow Office preview. It's a new default option, automatically enabling public preview features for any user enrolled in the Office current channel. So if they're already in there and this is enabled for them here, then they automatically get it. The preview features aren't supported, so all of you that are in GCC, those preview features are not yet available. So hopefully that was clear as mud, but understanding, one, the importance of getting the change before everyone else, and making sure that this is enabled for the group, the M365 governance group, your board, your champions, your early adopters, anyone who cries about, I want to see this, give them the early access so they can, reap the benefit. All right, switching. I'm going to just talk about the stakeholders real quick. I think we're all and have been familiar with this whole concept of a traditional siloed management where we don't talk to each other. maybe whoever knows the reason, right? But we just don't think, oh yeah, maybe this change that occurs, well, I only told help desk. Oh, should I actually have to talk to communications? So they send out email, and the change affects, whoa, that was fast. And the change affects, let me go back a little bit. And the change may affect the actual admin that has to do it, right? This is like, because it is an evergreen service management model, you all need to talk about it. And in order to do that, you have to figure out who are all your stakeholders. And it's interesting because I've been in an organization where we had no idea who the owner of Office 365 was. And it was like, a 60,000 employee company. One, nobody want to raise their hand and say they own it. But two, because there really isn't that such a thing, right? You have a piece of it. You own a piece of it. Maybe some of you out there, Jake, I think you're the full owner. I'm just going to believe that. But there's several owners, right? There's a lot of people who are have some sort of stake in the claim. Maybe they're not an admin, they don't touch it, but they're a decision maker. Maybe they run the help desk for all the products, but I always get, they're the designated Teams person. So just thinking through there's so many people that are involved in managing this evergreen service and services, right? This software as a solution. And because of that, you have to actually build something together. You can do it all kinds of ways. I've heard it called a tiger team or, project management, program management. I developed it as a governance board in a last organization. It's really around being transparent with everyone for service and tenant management, focusing on ROI and adoption, having your sponsor, your executive sponsor who just spent $1 million on these products. Chances are you probably ought to have a lot of effort in understanding the change, communicating it, connecting, getting your return on your investment. That's really the whole goal, right? Is leveraging all the tools, knowing when the change occurs, knowing that it can help a business become more productive or more efficient or whatever the case. And that's a whole, there's a whole cycle in developing all that. But I think it's around making sure you connect to everybody and communicate, right? It's a left hand to the right hand. And in this case, it can be a multiple people depending on your size of your organization. So I think of this, we needed to create a RACI, right? We need to know who's focused on strategy, who's focused on governance. Maybe it's one of you. However, it could be 30 of you, right? And you might not even know their name. Like I didn't honestly, in creating this, it probably took me a couple months because I found out later we had a person who was in charge of Power BI, but they were actually from the business and not in IT. Like it's just going through and drilling who's in charge of what, and then all getting together and talking. And there's a whole thing on like really how to build a governance board, but I just wanted to bring it up here to just talk about it's around, how are you managing the services? How are you knowing when a change occurs? Who are all the people? You might have a product manager for Viva. And then you might have, you might even go more granular and have somebody who evaluates it, who is in charge of the delivery of it, and then who's in charge of operations. And on top of that, you might have a BA, you might have a project manager. Don't forget support, right? You got to have your engineers, you have your help desk, legal needs to approve it. Networking might have to open up a port to allow it. They think of all of that. There's actually a whole lot more involved. I'd say the larger your organization is, I would recommend making this, and I know it's a big ask or, it's change, but creating an actual workforce productivity department focused on your Microsoft investment. And the reason I say that is because it's a beast. We all know managing it for one person or a small team and rolling it out and doing the adoption. It does take a village. And actually, if you architect your department in that way, now it's a whole lot easier to create communication and having cadences and knowing what people are doing. So depending on the size and if you can do it, I would recommend that. And then of course, tenant management, who's doing what, right? Who is, touching sensitivity labels and who's enabling conditional access policies. Knowing those people, if you don't, that's the hard part, right? If you don't know who they are, who do you go to when help desk is saying, hey, this person's name is not syncing, they changed it last week. Can somebody go out to Azure Active Directory, connect, sync health status, and take a look if there's an error, right? We have to know who each other are so we can all help each other. So those are some of the things. These are some areas and ways that I've built focus areas in the past. You can have any which way that makes sense for your company. But I think as far as service management goes, a lot of that's on monitoring, learning, reading, doing all that research, communicating, figuring out, what matters to people. You don't want to send out an email every day, right? You want to have a location or a way, a place that they can consume. Product training. Yes, there's probably not much more I can say about that other than yes, right? We need to be up and caught up to speed on all the training. It's hard to do it if you're the only one. So as much as you can, as you know a product is coming, to get at least ramped a little bit. And then developing your support model, whether that's your internal one between your help desk and your various tiers, to how you are managing your support tickets within Microsoft. So that's my idea of service management. Tenant management, of course, so that this is all the wrenching piece, right? What are the controls that you need to leverage, especially if Microsoft says, hey, this probably fits for about 80% of you. And then you go to your change management organizational model and you go, well, you know what, we're very restrictive. Or, hey, we either one that you're on, maybe you're somewhere in the middle. The controls doesn't mean that it all applies to you. You always have to go through and create the policies that actually make sense. You want to turn off live events, or you only want 10 people to use them, maybe just your executives. You have to create that policy. So knowing where all the controls are, creating them that are applicable for your organization, setting all the different services up, your identity, your licensing, monitoring that, auditing, all the controls that you need. And that's another portion, right, of the governance. And then, of course, you want to make sure that people who are using the products, or that you made this huge investment, that they're actually using it. So that's monitoring through all our usage analytics, monitoring the product, decommissioning on-prem. I cannot tell you how joyful it was when I got to decommission an old SharePoint 2007 server. So, I mean, you got to take the wins when you can. Reducing on-prem storage. I think a lot of people are doing these other initiatives. They're side initiatives, but they're related, right? You want to reduce all your file shares. So maybe you're moving to OneDrive. You want to monitor that people are using OneDrive. You want to monitor, are people using WhatsApp, or are they using Teams chat, kind of eliminating some of that shadow IT. And that really helps reduce a lot of the dollars, because there's people who will always find a way to do something if it didn't work the first time. Staying in check with that. And then, of course, automating your security policies. All right, this is the last portion. Hopefully that's okay, Don. I might lean in, push into your time slot a little bit. All right, where, what, and who to communicate change. This is understanding your workforce, your roles, your tools, where people live, what people care about. That's not an easy task, right? None of these are like one person doing them all. But understanding them is probably at least the first step. So where do you communicate change? Well, what are your tools, right? We all have maybe different tools, different things we like. Some people have probably been living in SharePoint. I bet a lot of people are living in email, so they want that email. They need that email. And a lot of people have moved away from that, right? They're using Teams. They maybe have a communicator app. Maybe they store it all in a knowledge base and they use chatbot to tap the resource. And you might be leveraging Viva Engage soon. Well, that will be Viva Engage Communities, Stories, Storyline. Soon, maybe Viva Amplify. So there's a lot of tools out there, and knowing what tools that marketing and comms uses, maybe IT uses, will really help. Figuring out which is the right tool. And then you've got where do people, where are they gathering? Where's the data? Do you have a champions program, a governance board? Do you have a user group? I think depending on the size of your organization, having an internal user group for products that you're rolling out, that's incredibly helpful. It could be in many flavors. It could be a Yammer community where you put out these announcements, you create videos, you post them out there, people consume them, they like it. Maybe your champions take over, they end up running that Yammer community, and you just kind of slowly back away, right? You measure the sentiment analysis of it, and if you see an uptick of negative, okay, maybe you go back over there. So you've got a little bit of that can be automated. You could certainly create a physical, which I think is really helpful. And I don't mean physical in person, but a space that is a cadence once a month where you do training. Maybe you just have an open office hours. That can be super useful. So where are people gathering, right? Where are people gathering? And you might even have, I always thought this was interesting, but I didn't think about the value of it. But if a new product rolls out, one space that we might not think of right away, which is almost every department has a department meeting, right? And what if you could get 5 minutes of that meeting, and then you get everyone's attention on the thing that's coming out? So that's another kind of, I guess, tip that I have that I learned that was an easy way to get to the masses of, departments. All right, so what and who to communicate? You could look at the message center, you could look at the roadmap. There's different filters, different ways that you could do it. You could have something be planned for change, something to just stay informed, admin impact, could be end user impact. It could be just a security update. Chances are, like, think through all these communication types. And if it's security update, I doubt your end users care. So don't send it to them, right? Reduce the noise. If it's new applications, obviously that's an easy one. If it's an unexpected service incident, makes sense for help desk, right? And maybe think of the RACI document, right? If it's an unexpected service incident, you would say, well, as IT, I'm responsible for that, but maybe help desk needs to be informed, right? Just thinking through what matters to people and what are they accountable for, and what do they need to know. And once you group them, right? These are just examples. No, I guess best practice is where I come from this, but you might have your own types. And then it's who, where are those people, right? Where do you deliver that communication with the tool that you were referring to? And the reason why I have this who section is that people might be getting the change in different ways, right? What about all those people that are in the update policy? If there's a service health issue and it's to the targeted release group, you're going to want to communicate that differently, right? You don't need to communicate to the entire organization. They'll be like, I don't notice anything. So really understanding who needs that information, what's the group that needs that information, what tool do you want to use, and how are you what's the communication type? All right, this is my next slide, and that I absolutely love because I know I only have a couple more, Don, so I might be on time. Understanding where people work and where they prefer communication. I bet all of us on this call can say, chances are, if I'm talking to my parents, I'm talking to them on the telephone. Not a landline, but a mobile. They might be talking to you on a landline. If I'm talking to my kid, it's chat. It's definitely chat, right? If it's friends from school, it's probably Facebook. If it's professional people I know, it's probably LinkedIn. Like, we have so many different places that we communicate, and we probably wish it was only one, but it will never be, because we have 4 generations in the workforce. Might even argue to say 5. This is about their ratio, and this is what they care about, and how they want to communicate, right? They want to communicate, if you are an older generation, asynchronously. You want email mostly. You want to be on the phone. You barely want to chat, right? You're like, I just want to pick up the phone and talk to you. And then you've got these other folks, right? And this goes back to, what type of change strategy does your company align with? And even talking to HR and saying, hey, do we have a summary on who the generations, the percentage of generations we have in our company? Because I do know a very large company that actually is majority millennial, that's crazy, because that means the way they communicate, they don't want email. They don't, and probably won't. And the Gen Z, they're never going to look at email. Like, I could email my son and I won't hear anything. And then about a month later, I'll be like, did you ever see that? Oh, I don't check that. So, it's understanding, as you move through the different generations, you think of all the tools that you have. How do people want to consume information? So this is extremely important. Yeah, if only there was a tool that could help amplify the communication. Hey, Amplify is one. I think Power Automate, Viva Stories. Well, think of creating a story and sending it to Outlook, send it to Teams, right? We've got to think of like all the ways and places that people care about. So knowing that and knowing, you've got a different change strategy, you've got to understand what that is. You got to know where the change occurs. You need to know how people prefer to be communicated, so you're not like missing the vote by emailing, and all these millennials are like, yeah, I just throw that away. So you have to like really know what people prefer. But internally, when I think of governance, and this is my last slide, I have some resources, is building a place for managing all the change. Of course, leverage teams, right? I think it's a no-brainer. Use the tools that you are supporting. Create a team, invite your entire governance board to it, create channels that make sense for people, keep it open for everyone. There's no need to create private or shared channels in this. I mean, maybe, I guess. I guess it might depend. But I mocked one up in my demo environment, and basically I took the roadmap that I showed you earlier. I grabbed the RSS feed. There's no filtering. It's sad, but you can grab the RSS feed and put a webhook into your team channel and connect it. So now that's one less place that you have to go out to. You can do the same thing with if you leverage the M365 usage analytics. That's a Power BI template. You can pin that as a tab on the channel that has to do with ROI or usage or analytics. You can also put the service health status. I think of what's a great location for everybody who's supporting to go to. Oh, I'm just going to go there. So now you're bringing that to them instead of making people go to all these 8, 10 different places. Lots of ideas. I mean, you can put in secure score, compliance score. I mean, it really, whatever makes sense, put in your governance guides, put in your training documentation that you're iterating on. Put in a list of who's in these policies, these update policies, or these early adopter programs. Who are your champions? Like, this can be one central location where you can, see everything, automate everything, and also put your M365 Message Center Planner as a tab in here as well. So it's a one-stop shop. Anyway, I think this is a great way, at least best practice for me, that I've learned on operationalizing the governance of managing M365. So with that, I am done. Here are my resources, not a ton, but this is being recorded. So if you need to come back or if you have any questions, feel free to reach out. And of course, as always, thank you for your time and listening today. Thank you. Turn it over to you, Don. If you're there.
Jeepers, I have to follow that up. Are you kidding me?
Awesome. Good luck.
Oh, yeah. Let's make sure I have the right one. There it is. That's the one I wanted. Okay. Excuse me. All right. So, Teams Premium. You may be, I've heard a lot of buzz about what's going on with this, or that this is coming. In fact, it's coming very soon. So let's kind of talk about what's going on specifically with this new Teams license SKU. Just a little bit about myself, Donais. I am the Vice President for MN365 User Group. I also work at Microsoft. In fact, Michelle and I are in the same area. I'm a converged comms CSM, and I focus on Teams calling. I focus on Teams meetings, as well as Teams meeting rooms. So because of what Teams Premium brings to the table, it affects a lot of what I talk with customers about as being a customer success manager. So, and especially on the meeting side, Teams Premium covers a lot of different areas, being advanced webinar capabilities, advanced meeting stuff, But even more so as far as that AI-powered meeting-driven pieces. And I think this is important to understand too, is that it's not just about advanced webinar, right? There's more to it than that. It could be some security pieces. It could be that AI-driven pieces that could be beneficial for the organization or your organization. So let's take a look at what's under the hood with this particular tool. All right, so Teams Premium. Hang on, why is that? Yep, that's it. All right, so Teams Premium, as I mentioned, is a new SKU that's available, will be available here starting in February. And it's already kind of going in public preview. So some organizations have already kind of looked into what this really means. And we're going to talk about, get into some detail. But again, I can't get into a lot of detail because it's still not necessarily all the features that are released, but I can give you what we're hearing from the product team and what they've released so far. So, all right, so let's start with this. The first thing that you're going to see with this is this capability of doing what's called a meeting guide. And just think of this as a meeting template, right? So the capability of when, as an organization, you may have, different types of meetings that happen throughout the course, as you guys are working, right? You may have a client call. In this example, as you see here, a client call, a brainstorming, or a help desk type meeting. Now, really what this is a preset meeting options, right? So the things that you would normally do if you go in and create a Teams meeting and you go meeting options, these are already preset, so I don't have to do anything. So for instance, you could have, maybe it's a town hall type meeting. You could create one that is set specifically for you, for how you do town halls using Teams meetings, and then deploy it to those people that do those Teams meetings or those town halls, right? So then all they have to do is go into a new meeting dropdown, and town hall is going to be sitting there so that they don't have to worry about the configuration. Things that you can do in these meetings, the things like, we'll talk about this, sensitivity policies or security pieces that you may want to have enabled in those particular scenarios, right? So that is that templatizing of those types of meetings that you use the most within your organization. All right, another thing is the ability to be able to do custom landing pages, custom branding, and things like together mode. And I'll drop into a little bit more of these. So the first thing is, if we're going to go into the custom branding piece, this is where your Teams admins can go in there and actually can create a customization. It's actually a new area within the Teams Admin Center that'll be called customization policies. And in there, you can go ahead and put a logo. You can go ahead and put your custom image in there that you want to have displayed. And on top of that, if you want to be able to put a primary and secondary hex codes for colors in there. This is going to be deployed. Again, you can deploy this across everybody if you want to, or a subset of people. It's a policy, just like all the other policies in Teams Admin Center. But then as a user, I can then enable or disable that particular branding in meeting options. And I will tell you, a lot of these features that you have the ability as an end user, if you have that Teams Premium license and you have this policy associated to it, we'll be able to enable or disable some of these features within meeting options. So meeting options is going to get big. There's going to be a lot of features in there depending upon what's going on. All right. And guys, throw questions in the chat, come off mute if you do have anything. I'm looking forward to some of this stuff as well. All right. The other thing you can do is you can also do org-defined backgrounds. I want you to notice the one that I have right now. This is an org design background, right? Obviously, I work at Microsoft. Microsoft Teams is my bread and butter. That's what I do, right? But I have access, or we have access to 3 or 4 different types of organization-defined backgrounds that allow us then to be able to be uploaded, again, through the Team Center. And there's a customization policy setting, just like the organizational background pieces, right? You can do this. You can actually add up to 50. I don't know how many you're going to need, but 50 is a pretty big piece. Now, to be able to access it, the administrator can upload it. But as an end user, I need Teams Premium license to be able to access those backgrounds so that I can use them in my meetings, right? So that's the caveat. Again, that's where the licenses will come in. Can you restrict to only those backgrounds? That's a great question. I don't believe you can, Jamie. But it's a good possibility that would be something that we can, that would be configurable later on. Again, this is early. We'll see. Maybe some configurations will be in there, or maybe PowerShell to be able to say, hey, just only use these. We'll do that, right? That's what we're looking for. And then John, so I'm assuming we're actually losing this feature for regular users, which is too bad. Well, no, because this is an org-wide defined background. You're going to get backgrounds. You can upload your own backgrounds, John. So you can do that. But from an org-wide perspective, then you can go. But as long as if you're in preview today, let's just say that, there'll be a time period where then you're going to have to flip over eventually to get to that premium license to be able to get it to work. So if you're using the preview right now, yeah, eventually you're going to have to go to Teams Premium to be able to keep it. All right. Will these backgrounds work on mobile device? Ooh, that's a great question, Elliston. I don't know off the top of my head. I actually have not seen that inside mobile. I actually haven't tried, so that'd be something I'm going to try. I'll see if I can get back to you guys on that. All right. All right, a lot of conversation going on. All right, I'm just going to let that go for right now, and if I have to jump in, I will. Okay. Organization together mode scene. All right, so you guys are familiar, just thumbs up if you guys are familiar with the together mode capability. You've played with it, you know what's going on with it. Okay, so I got a couple people who have done it. Try it, do it. If you don't have it restricted, go ahead and do it. It is a great way to be able to encourage people to come on camera, to interact with each other, and make that meeting a little bit better for everybody, right? So there is features where we can then create customized together mode scene. Again, part of the premium package. If you go into Microsoft Scene Studio, you'll be able to actually create one where you can then place and say, I want these people to be here. So think of like a town hall, a virtual town hall, and you have people that is all over the place that you want as a panel. You could actually make an image that's going to be like they're sitting on stage or sitting at a table on a stage, right? And then you can plug these camera areas into it, and then I can say, I want Bob here, I want that. I could actually set that up. And so that I can then have like a town hall type meeting with those people, even though it's virtual, right? So it gives the essence of, hey, I'm in a town hall type meeting. So this is something, again, premium mode that we'd be able to do and push out. All right. Any questions? Yeah, maybe it is actually called, I got to remember, I think it might be the Team Scene Designer. As everything, it changes all the time. So Brian, we'll double check on that and make sure. All right, any questions on that first part with the custom branding, with the together mode, those types of things? The idea is, and I don't remember because I haven't actually done it yet, John. I think the idea is you could, depending upon the scenario, or they're slotted so that they would go into those spots. That would be something I want to find out more as this feature is coming out. Will you be lose the create the together mode? No, you won't. This is going to be the org version of it, right? So it would be pushed out across the organization. That's part of the premium license versus, hey, you can go and do it and upload yourself if you want to. That's me, Joel, that was asking that question. All right, jumping to advanced meeting protection. Yeah, Brian, I agree with that one. All right, advanced meeting protection. So what we're talking about is things like watermarking, things like end-to-end encryption and sensitivity labels as part of that Teams meeting, right? So let's dive into this just a little bit. So the first thing we're going to talk about is end-to-end encryption for Teams meetings. The one thing you keep in mind is that for really true end-to-end encryption, you need to have both parties need to have this enabled. That means if you are internal, great, right? And you've enabled and encryption, great. But if it's external, they would also have to do that as well. So important to keep that in mind. But again, with the Teams Premium license, you will be able to unlock this feature, and this can be enabled. And there's going to be a new section within the Teams Admin Center, enhanced encryption policies, that you can create a policy and then assign to groups or users depending upon the scenario. Once you're in there, and it's enabled, as a meeting organizer, I have the ability to go into, if you haven't guessed already, meeting options and enable that feature. From there, then, once you start the meeting, you will see in the upper left-hand corner that this is then encrypted. And if it is encrypted on both ends, right, you can actually click on that shield and it will give you a series of security code that you can verify on the other end that this is truly an encrypted meeting, end to end, right? The one thing to understand with this is certain things are encrypted. That would be audio, video, and video-based screen sharing. Those are the only things that are encrypted. Outside of that, as mentioned here, apps, avatars, filters, chat, Q&A are not encrypted. If you need to have an encrypted type scenario, you would need to make sure you don't use those. Desktop and mobile are supported. Other supported or unsupported platforms, you won't be able to even get in and join that meeting, right? Because it needs to be a secure meeting at that point. Watermark. So I don't know if you've been to any large meetings that is NDA, you're not supposed to share a type scenario, but realistically, people could take screenshots. People could be able to literally record what's going on and then send that out other ways, right? So this actually adds another layer of protection to your meetings, right? So the watermark literally is this capability where, if enabled, then you will actually see the end user. So if I'm attending this meeting, I will see my email address plastered across the screen. And from there, I would then, if I took a screenshot and sent it out, everybody would know it came from me, right? So that kind of an idea. So screenshots is another area that you can then set up in Teams Admin Center. It's part of the meeting policies in there, and it would include watermark video and watermark shared content, right? So anything I share out there or the video that I'm sharing would also have that watermark. Again, set up the meeting options, supported in desktop, mobile, Teams Rooms on Windows, and Surface Hub. Notice the limitations. It will not see the watermark in recordings, PowerPoint Live. So if I had that, you wouldn't be able to see the watermark right now when I'm presenting this way. Whiteboard, together mode, or large gallery. Is not supported in web and VDI. That's the other thing to keep in mind. If you are accessing it through an unsupported platform, it will be audio only, and you won't be able to see any of the video from that meeting. All right, then sensitivity labels for meetings. Right, so a lot of organizations have gone down the road of adding sensitivity labels for content within their organization, whether it be SharePoint, OneDrive, Teams, you name it, they've set up sensitivity labels. All right, so the idea is that you can set up sensitivity labels to be able to limit what can happen within a meeting. So a lot of the meeting option things that you have, who can bypass the lobby, allow dial-in, who can present, who can record, that kind of stuff can be set up. And the sensitivity label can be used to control that based off of the type of information you want to be able to present in this meeting. So you get a sensitivity label set up. It's available within the organization. You go and create a meeting, and inside meeting options, you can set what you, based off of what you know this meeting is all about, you can say highly confidential. And based off of that, it's automatically going to set all your options for that meeting based off of that sensitivity label, right? Because of how this is working, right? And how it's being set up. When that is set up, you'll actually see a lock on the shield. and that will give you specifically what information is being blocked or what is available or what's not available. So you can actually see what's going on within that meeting. So Chris was saying those are some pretty significant limitations, hoping it's short term before we add compatibility with watermarks. Yeah, I agree. I think they're going to add more capabilities with that as well. And bring it out to other platforms. All right. We'll be able to change the size of the text in the closed caption for those visually impaired, like in live. Chicky, I'm not quite sure about that one. I haven't seen any documentation on that one. Right now, it's changing languages, but outside of that, it's not changing the size for the closed captioning. I'm hoping that's going to come because the accessibility piece is quite important for that to happen. So, all right, great question. Thank you, Chicky. Intelligent recap, as I was mentioning, and as I've been kind of talking about, it's not only about just registration and advanced webinar types things. It's also about meetings and getting more out of your meetings. So this section is really about the intelligent recap that you get with Teams Premium. The things that you're going to see, things like AI generated tasks, which is kind of interesting because what it will do is it will go through your meeting and it will literally look for, hey, I need to follow up on that account conversation we had with Dave, right? So it will pull that information and say, hey, do you want this to be a task? Who should I assign this to? And you'll get this capability of being able to take a look and do those follow-ups, right, based off of that meeting. Again, it's like a virtual assistant that will be helping out with this. In the video, the other thing that I will also do is auto-generate chapters. So if you're recording this and especially if you're doing things like a presentation of a PowerPoint deck, the high points of the title slides, it'll actually see those things and then generate a chapter within that video feed or that recording so you can jump to it later on. And there's advances within SharePoint and OneDrive Stream on SharePoint, I should say, that allow you to be able to jump to those chapters as you need to. Again, personalized timeline markers. If somebody's name was called out, that will be mentioned inside that recording as well, and in the transcript so that I can jump to it if I need to. And then intelligent transcript search on top of that, then being able to really anything that a speaker said, I can see everything that a speaker said and jump to that. I can then be able to search against that and then immediately jump to that part of that video to be able to see what was talking about, making it a lot easier for me to go through a 2-hour video and find just the tidbits of information that I need. Teams live transcription for captions, all right? And this is, if I have captionings going on, it will automatically translate it into a different language. Over 40 different languages that are going to be a part of that. If you have Teams Premium as an organizer, then everybody attending that meeting will be able to use the translation caption capability. Okay. Right now it's available within preview, but as Teams Premium becomes available, it's going to flip over to that premium SKU, and you're going to need to use that. All right, let's talk about what I mentioned in the Message Center section. Yeah, oh, that's a great question. Could I do multiple languages simultaneously? I don't believe so, Jicky. You need to see Farsi and English. Okay. Well, that would be an interesting. Right now, I think it's one language that you can just translate at a time. I don't think it literally is in that square down on the bottom where you would see that. Typically, most people would go in and they would say, hey, I need Farsi or I need Mandarin Chinese to be able to do it, and they would be able to translate it right there. But as far as two, I don't think it's at that. It will be able to do that at that point. Okay. Advanced virtual appointments. So this is what I was kind of talking about. It's that booking capability on steroids. So you're able to then, there's going to be a virtual appointments app that you'll be able to set this up and literally have a dashboard of how these appointments are going. So think about it as just streamlining that appointment management capability in one spot. You get analytics, you get all that information. You have this capability of doing a custom waiting room. So that's when, you have an appointment set up and Michelle has an appointment with me. I'm not there yet. She jumps into a custom waiting room, right? So you can brand that. You can do that first class experience as they're coming into that branding room. And then I jump into that meeting, whether it be a healthcare visit or whatever it happens to be. You get the ability to be able to do things like SMS reminders and push that out so they get a link to go right into that meeting on their mobile device. And better yet, they don't even need Teams installed to be able to get into that meeting, right? So then it will automatically pop up. They'll be able to go into that. It's and they use the term frictionless, and I like it because it makes sense from that side of things. Excuse me. On top of that, you're able to then bring in forms. So if you have some forms they need to fill out to get more data before they do that, you can add that form link in there so that they can then fill it out prior to it and get that information to the person that's going to be having that meeting with them. Adam is asking, any idea if SMS is getting integrated with other aspects of Teams? Well, right now, no. I know that from an SMS perspective, that's on the roadmap. I don't have any idea when that's coming as far as just regular Teams. Think of this as a baby step. If we can do it this way, we're probably going to be able to do it other ways, right? So that's coming, I'm hoping. I want a trumpet to go off when I join. Yeah, that's a good one. All right. Let's talk about one of the things I really am interested in is the advanced webinar feature part of this. All right, so with this, we're getting a few things that we've been kind of waiting for quite a while. Registration, wait list, and approvals are a part of that. Automated reminder emails going out ahead of time. Virtual green room, which thank God, yes, this is an opportunity for you to be able to have an area for your presenters, and we'll talk more about that. And then manage what the attendee sees. So it's going to be interesting because I think this is now starting to see some of the things that we saw in Microsoft Teams live event, right? And we're now starting to see some of these capabilities in advanced webinar, all of this driven through this Teams premium SKU. All right, so let's first go to the registration list and manual approvals. Adam, this does not require dynamics for registration. This is part of the standalone piece that is already built into this. Now, granted, if you want to connect this to Dynamics, right, and some of those integrations, they are already starting to have some of those capabilities, but this is a standalone. I get an Excel spreadsheet that gives me the registration information so that I don't have to worry about that. I can put it to whatever system that I have. So it does not require any of the D365 capabilities at this point. And then Eileen, is basic bookings going away? No, I don't think basic booking is going to go away. It's getting some improvements. I still think bookings is still going to be a capability that you can use. But, I think we had another session on that not that long ago that talked about bookings. So you can check that out on our YouTube site. All right, registration, wait list, and manual approvals. Okay, so one of the things you're going to be getting is the capability of being able to add capacity. So how many people do you want to be able to have in this particular meeting? And then I want to add a wait list to it, right? So I want to say, if it hits 1,000, 1,001 is going to go on the wait list. And if somebody cancels, then that person that's 1,001 is going to be automatically added. And then if I have approvals enabled, I can approve them, they can get in, they'll get the email, the process can go on from that. You can also limit when registration is. So from date, time to end date and time. So it helps the organizer manage these very large events that you may be having. You also will see an attendee status. You can see those that have been approved, those have that not been approved, right, or rejected. And then I can go back over those if I need to. and get more details about their registration. So if in my registration form I have additional information that I needed, maybe it's like company, title, location, things like that, then I can see that information from this attendee status section that you see down here. Automated reminder email. This is something that we would literally go out the day of the event. It's custom branded based off of how you have your event set up. And by the way, I do want to go back to this for 1 second. I don't know how many of you actually have done webinars within your organizations, but just this view right here is a major change in how webinars are going to end up looking, right? So you'll have different areas that you're going to have to set up. The bio, presenter bios, which thank God we're starting to get those as well. The theming is a little bit more extensive than we've had in the past, so that really helps out with those. It's just a little bit better view than we've had in the past. Now, the one thing I will tell you by utilizing, and we're using this internally, is I forget to publish because it's so easy to not do that. So I make a whole bunch of changes. I go out and view the site, like, why did oh yeah, I have to publish those changes to the website that's built for this registration. That's something to keep in mind as you're working on this new look and feel. And again, the reminder emails, they'll go out the day of, custom branding, whatever you have your theme is set up, it'll have that join link, that button that they can just click on, and it will take them right to the event so they can get started in watching it. And then the virtual green room, probably one of the things that I've been waiting for quite a while. In Teams Live Event, right? Teams Live Event, we had this capability of all coming into the meeting ahead of time and then starting the broadcast, pushing a button, and now we're live. And we haven't really had anything like that. So really, this gives us this capability of having an area where presenters and organizers, moderators, whoever we have for roles can get together, have those conversations, chat, get things ready, right? Make sure the content is ready. Make sure everybody's video and audio is working. Do those types of checks. And then when we're ready to go, we can then start the meeting. Now, attendees' point of view will be as like you see in the bottom. I will see, welcome to blah, 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 blah. We're starting momentarily, some kind of a customization meeting information so that they can know what's going on, right? So it gives this idea of, hey, we're ready. We're getting there. We're almost ready for you. We will be there shortly. And then as soon as I start that start meeting button, then I'm able to then bring everybody into that meeting, and then we can actually have that event, right? Again, part of the premium SKU, the organizer needs to have the premium license associated to it, but those attending or presenting do not have to have the premium SKU to be able to do this experience. As with live event, this is the important thing to keep in mind, this also applies here. Presenters, moderators need to be on a desktop or web version to be able to have this work. Mobile is not supported from a presenter or organizer perspective, okay? And this can be enabled, again, meeting options. All right. Let's see, I got a couple more questions going back to the mailing invite. May I do a color priority to the calendar invite, emphasize important? No, not at this point. Right now, it's just a regular email invite session. It comes in. John, anonymous attendees in webinar 2 is coming to premium. Yes, but not yet. I know that it's on the radar, but it's not available yet, but it will be coming to premium as an option. Right? Does the integration with other switchers, or are they more layout options than existing? Adam, what you get in the Teams meeting right now is what you would get right now. So if I wanted to, I could do different layouts. So presenter mode type things, that would be what I have. Outside of that, I don't have any layouts, kind of like not quite yet. So I would still use the third party like OBS or those types of tools to be able to do something like that. Thank you, John. John, quarter 2, 2022 or 2023? Jicky, yeah, you could use OBS PM in live events. Yeah, I have had customers that have done that very easily. Yep, it's just HDMI input if you want to do that, or NDI stream, you can use that within meetings. Right. Another feature which I really like is this manage what attendees see. And this is, again, getting closer to what Teams live event is all about, right? Excuse me. So what I have the ability to do is basically say, I want to have, maybe I have 3 or 4 people who have presenters who have cameras enabled, and I only want to see Bob first with the content. And then halfway through, I want to be able to add Mary in, but her camera's already on. So literally, if you take a look at the screenshots that I have here, right now, this person is being shown in the meeting, right? And somebody else is off screen and waiting to be put on screen. I have the ability, I'm now starting to do some producer style type activities. I'm able to combine both of them. So both women are on that meeting at this point with the content, right? But again, I decide as a producer to be able to add who needs to be in there at what time. So I'm starting to do some of that stuff that I've had the ability to do in Teams live event, off screen versus on screen type of thing. And this is what's called managed mode. Highlight that here, managed mode, and you will find that in Teams meeting or Teams options when you set up the Teams meeting. All right. OBS have only been available for internal users because it uses stream in the backend. Adam, I did not think that was the case. I thought you would be able. I've had customers who have been able to do that with external users, just because of how the broadcast is being brought in. Now, I will say that if your external company has blocked things like NDI from accessing, if you're using NDI. The other thing too is I've had OBS, had companies using OBS with just HDMI input and doing it that way. That seems to work too. So I could do a live concert and live event with multiple cameras. Yeah, you definitely could, if that's what you really want to do. All right. Questions on the advanced webinar pieces that I was talking about? All right. Oh, is that everything? Yep, I guess that's all I have at this point. Any other questions? I mean, realistically, when it comes to new features, you're going to see a lot of the newer features, right, going into premium, especially if they're around the AI side of things. You're going to see that, especially if they're going to be in the advanced webinar pieces, you're going to see those happening in the premium SKU before anything else, right? So keep that in mind. Now, not that we're not going to do in the regular SKU, you're going to still see some features in there, but the advanced stuff, the AI, the huge pieces, you're going to see them going in the premium SKU based off of what we're hearing. But a lot of really, really cool features that I feel that companies can take advantage of, not just the advanced webinar, but also day-to-day, especially the meeting AI insight pieces. All right. Any other questions?